Please help me and join me to give a warm, warm, warm brain injury welcome to Christine Weaver of Neuropraxis. Yeah, and then I'm gonna highlight you. Yes.
Thank you. Hi. Glad to be here. So just like what Daniel had mentioned to everyone, that this is a presentation I'm going to be doing for the Brain Injury Association of America. I'm an occupational therapist, and I've been working in the brain injury field for the last 30 years. So this presentation is really about understanding the effects of aging and brain injury. What's the functional implications of aging on brain injury, and what can we do to plan for the future needs? So, brain injury as it is right now, there's approximately 2.8 million people who sustain a traumatic brain injury in the United States every year. And it's a serious public health concern that results in extensive disability and death. Um, so there's two types of brain injury, and I think everyone probably is much more educated than I am when it comes to this. There's the traumatic and the acquired brain injury. um, so for the acquired brain injury, the most prevalent is stroke. Stroke increases with age. The risk of having a stroke increases with age, but it can occur at any age. I'm actually treating clients that are actually older than 20 years old and sometimes in their teens. About 34% of people hospitalized for stroke were less than 65 years old back in 2009. And both ischemic and hemorrhagic strokes may be caused by recreational substance abuse or misuse. And every year, there's more than 795,000 people in the United States have a stroke, and about 610,000 of these are their first strokes. So, when it comes to traumatic brain injury, it is defined as a disruption of the brain. It's caused by an external force. It could be based on it could be because of a hit on the head, motor vehicle accident, or falls. So 47.9% of traumatic brain injury are from falls. And this is the leading cause of the hospitalizations. And I want you to take note of this. It's the leading cause of hospitalizations for children from 0 to 17 and 55 years or older. So 17.1 are from percent are from being struck by an object or being assaulted, or 13% from motor vehicle accidents, 8.3 from assaults, and then 13.2 from unknown causes. There are certain areas of brain injury that we can kind of pinpoint, pretty much where the symptoms would be, but it really affects the whole person. It affects the physical changes, the cognitive difficulties, speech and language, your sensory effects. It could be about taste, sensitivity to light. It could also be about losing the sense of taste or smell. There's perceptual effects, which affects the visual changes or perception. Also, emotional changes. So on the effects of brain injury, I wanted to highlight several things, which is, like for the physical component, a lot of times we might, like someone who has sustained a brain injury might experience the loss of balance, immediate loss of balance, improve, like impairment of the tone or muscle tone, changes in the loss or senses, and then there's a lot of cognitive changes that happens, that affects the memory, problem solving, sequencing, attention and concentration, and emotional fatigue, or sorry, cognitive fatigue. And the emotional and behavioral component, it does bring about a certain level of anxiety, aggression, depression, disinhibition, or apathy. I always
Steve.
What I've learned over the Hi,
Hi.
did you want to
Yeah.
say something?
Yeah. Uh. Um. there were a couple of requests in regards to the speed in which you are speaking. If you could
Okay.
slow it down, yeah, that would be very, very
No,
helpful.
thank you.
Thank you. And I
Thank you so
love,
much.
thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Madeline. This is great, right? Professor Sternlick, thank you also, right? Because then what we're doing here is we're practicing, modeling how to be assertive with the needs that you have. So thank you very much, Christine. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for giving me that feedback. I love it. Thank you. So, for the emotional and behavioral component, one can suffer from or challenged by mood swings, the emotional ability, the crying, or like the intermittent crying. It could have affect a personality. What actually what I've experienced and actually have noticed in the past is that the exaggerated personality, it could, the brain injury can actually sometimes dampen your personality, or it could exaggerate your personality, and that in itself is a huge change for someone, because it can affect how they interact with others. Oops, sorry. So I think it's good to know what the long-term consequence is of a brain injury. I think that we have all been educated on the fact that it is a chronic disease process, that it comes with a variety of problems, and the problems doesn't necessarily go away in a month or a few months, and it could resolve somewhat, but it could appear in certain times of your life, and it does affect the social aspect of someone's life. It could also include changes in the family roles, which could bring about depression, anxiety, and increased somatic difficulties. So, people with a traumatic brain injury are more likely to be affected by seizures, accidental drug poisoning, infections, and pneumonia. People with a traumatic brain injury can have a seizure 50 times more than a regular person, 6 times more affected by pneumonia, 9 times much more exposed to infections, and 11 times more for drug or accidental drug poisoning. And a lot of times, the accidental drug poisoning is really about self medicating, that sometimes we try to use drugs or drinking as part of either helping us calm ourselves down, or be able to adapt or handle life stress, that could happen in different parts of our lifetime. So, traumatic brain injury also have been found that alcohol use gets worse in the period of 2 to 5 years, and that after a brain injury, individuals are also more likely to sustain a second brain injury. And some of the long term changes after traumatic brain injury would be long term unemployment, diminished social relationships, depression and aggression, post concussive symptoms, meaning increase of dizziness, memory challenges, also like Parkinsonism or changes in our coordination, unprovoked seizures, increase cognitive challenges, and much more penetrating cognitive decline. And there's also sufficient evidence about the dementia pugilistica, and what that means is that it has a combination of decreased cognitive decline and Parkinsonism, which is a combination of that, which is also been noticed with longtime boxers. And they've also suggested that suicide and psychosis also is a long term consequence of brain injury. PTSD, and some changes in the balance and like increasing of vertigo over time. So some of the comorbidities, I think I've already mentioned. It included the depression, aggression, but there's definitely an increase in comorbidities. Like as during the journey of someone who had a brain injury, there's usually a psychosocial and functional decline that can be affected by weight gain, and a lot of times that could be something more about the hormonal issues, or it could also be because of increased cognitive decline. A lot of the clients that tend to gain weight is because they don't really feel like they're safe in preparing their food, so they would actually go out and just buy fast food or eat the same thing over and over again, so they don't have to use the stove, so it'll be safer. Seizures, and then of course aging. So, living with the brain injury right now, there's about 5.3 million Americans living with a disability related injury from traumatic brain injury. And that's roughly 2% of the US population. There's about one of every 60 people in the US lives with a TBI related disability. And because of the advances in the medical technology, the mortality, morbidity rates after a traumatic brain injury have decreased. So that means that there's a number of individuals who's surviving brain injuries with increased disability. So just like what I said, that the mortality of the TBI has decreased substantially, but the disability rate has not, because brain injury can manifest in varying physical, psychosocial, communicative, cognitive, and behavioral deficits at different points of our lives. And it doesn't mean you will always have that help or that we can be timely in addressing the symptoms when that occurs. And I do have to also emphasize that, if these varying changes happens through the lifetime, it also includes the changes in our lifestyle. So that means losing a loved ones, moving, either you're working or losing a volunteer job, that affects someone's ability to cope, which also brings about, certain psychosocial behavior challenges. So many brain injury clients are engaging in a much reduced number of leisure activities, which are more sedentary and less social. And I do want to let you guys know, whenever I get a report that someone is depressed, I always ask them what are the things that they're not able to do, and what are the things that makes them afraid to do. And if this is something that you can always ask yourself, if you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not engaging with my family, what is it that I don't feel like going out. I think asking those questions for yourself would really help out. And also it helps out if you do have the support system and someone that you could trust to actually just kind of bounce ideas off of, because I think that the more you have someone to kind of vent to, it allows you to kind of hear yourself and allow you to kind of open up more possibilities, to be able to avoid the isolation part of this as much as possible. So, aging is associated with changes in your physiological and biological makeup, but it also is affected by your environment, your psychological aspects, behavior, and social processes. So, aging as it is, because of the changes in your body, it could lead to hearing loss, cataracts, challenges with your vision, pulmonary disease, chronic conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, and also obesity. And also, as we age, there's also an emergence of different types of complexities or challenges. There's increased, they call it the geriatric syndromes, where oftentimes uh, the consequence of this is the consequence of the underlying factors that we're going to talk about later. It could be about, it could be complicated by incontinence, frailty, delirium, or certain medical challenges or complications. So, aging at the biological level, it results from the impact of the accumulation of some of the cellular or molecular damage over time. And it leads to a gradual decrease of physical and mental capacity that addresses your cognition. And there's a risk of growing disease process and untimely death. So these changes doesn't mean it's gonna go in a straight line, and the goal is to how do we actually look into kind of delaying aging, because it's not consistent. I think what we do as a person or for ourselves, how we take care of ourselves, also delays the onset of aging, because aging doesn't really is not defined by your age, but it's defined by the changes that happens within you. So aging is also associated with other life transitions, such as retirement, relocation to more appropriate housing, and the death of friends and family. And so far, the number of Americans that's age 65 and older is projected to nearly double from 52 million in 2018 to 95 million people by 2060. And also we're living longer. And also the gender gap in life expectancy is narrowing. Usually the women at the moment is live the life expectancy of a woman is 81.1 years, and then it's 76 years for males. However, even in the years before that, I know that there was always a bigger gap, because I'm actually a life care planner. So I look at life expectancies, and then I help project, things that someone is going to need for the rest of their lives. So, how does this actually play out when you have a brain injury? Because traumatic brain injury affects a large number of individuals, not just the young people, but also the elderly. And it's rapidly increasing. And because of the general improvements of medical technology, like what we've mentioned earlier, is that there's increased survival, and then there's rapid growth of the elderly population. But that means they're also surviving trauma and remaining or have increased disabilities over time. So, brain injury and aging, the consequences, it appears to, like when someone has had a brain injury in the past, it worsens the effect of the brain injury as time goes by. And the disability in head injured survivors, it also increases, with advancing age. The increased dependence also of after a brain injury shows that there's a greater level of dependence than younger survivors. So the older you are, there tends to be a more dependence on others for life skills. So one of the things that I also wanted to focus on is because when we were talking about falls and for brain injury, that is the number one aspect or cause of a brain injury. And so and it is so for also for the aging population. And the cause of the falls for the aging population, one is age, Of course, there's related changes in the brain structure that changes the way we think, our reaction time, our decisions, judgment that can challenge us in day to day, right? And then people with a history of fall, it's expected that people who had fallen for the last 12 months can actually fall, can have another fall after 12 months has passed. The fear of falling is actually very interesting because when we say after someone had fallen in the past or like an experience that the fear of falling may relate to actually being cognitively preoccupied. So, and even that fear itself, the more that you try to, because you haven't resolved that fear, the more it can actually make you, that can actually boomerang on you. I remember helping someone kind of get out of bed once. And because she had fallen in the past, she was really, really fearful. So the more when we stood up, as soon as we stood up, she started fighting me and started pushing me. So that meant, I mean, I had to prevent her from falling. So it might be that she could take me with her easily. So, but it's definitely a concern, that fear of falling. There are muscle changes that happens, from your muscle tone to muscle strength, your flexibility. I always say to people, I think yoga is such a great tool or exercise for everyone, not just one or the other, because it does work on flexibility, the strength, and then our ability to focus, and just breathing is a big deal for all of us. The altered balance, how it does kind of add on to the risk of falling. The number of medications you're taking can also significantly increase the risk of falls. Like some people would be taking some like a blood pressure medication, and if the dosage is not right, there might be times that when you take it and it drastically drops your blood pressure, and that can make you dizzy, can actually make you fall. So it's very important to always talk to your doctors and be educated on what you're taking, what the side effects are. Because if it can increase your falls, and that is something that you really want to kind of get ahead of. So there's also some visual deficits and spatial disturbances, not knowing how far a certain step is, how deep is the curb, how deep you have, how much do you have to step down, navigating the stairs. So a misstep can actually contribute to a fall. A vestibular disorder, a vertigo can definitely affect someone's or increase the risk of falls, and cognitive deficits. It's actually found that 2 out of 3 individuals with dementia or cognitive impairment are statistically likely to fall each year. So something that we also do not think about is the low mood and related medication, like not feeling like energetic, or feeling like I just want to get through this day. But that low mood actually decreases your reaction time, because we tend to really just kind of go through our day, which is surprising, right? We don't really think that low mood is false, because low mood probably we would end up on the couch, just isolate and stay home, right? But low mood when you're out and about can also decrease your your vigilance, and reaction time. And also, and especially if it's related to medication, can affect your cognition. Incontinence, when there's an urgency, incontinence can cause a fall, because that's one of the things, is that we're not really paying so much attention, that if there's anything in the middle of the hallway, as you go to the bathroom, that can definitely you know, um, you can trip and fall on it. Chronic conditions like the TBI, stroke, dementia, and multiple sclerosis. Some short term factors like your medications and alcohol intake, activity related, walking, stairs climbing. And a lot of times when we tend to become so confident that we could do things, that's when actually the fall can also happen because we're overestimating our abilities. And there are some environmental factors like poor lighting, bad kitchen organization, big carpets and rugs that can trip you, and clothing and footwear that you can step on. Like I know I am not too tall, so when I buy clothes, I really want to make sure that the pants are tailored, or else I'll be walking around stepping on them, right? So what's interesting is that as the more that I did this research, the brain injury and aging actually do converge in similar ways. So there are physical changes, there are cognitive changes, there's the psychosocial, behavioral, and environmental and community. So when you talk about the physical changes, you have the strength, the sexual function, seizures, coordination. Although aging doesn't really bring about seizures, but there are things like some medication that can actually trigger that. Memory for the cognition, memory, judgment, decision, problem solving. For your psychosocial and behavior, it could also bring about a certain type of depression and anxiety and decrease self-monitoring, because we always I think as we age, and I've seen it in my patients, not just someone with a brain injury but also older, especially with my grandparents and mom, they really don't want to accept the fact that, hey, I need to wear a hearing aid now, or hey, I really need someone to go with me to the store. And those are the certain things that we really want to make sure is that we can look at ourselves and figure out, what do we actually need to be safe, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And then also for some of the environmental and community aspects would be limitation in transportation. People who are aging, not all of them are able to drive. Relationships also disrupted. There's a limited number of recreation activities that they can engage in. So, if I really wanted to boil down the similarities of brain injury and aging, it boils down to these six things. One is the decrease in the physical skills. That fall is the number one cause of injury. There's cognitive decline. There's changes in your health, and that people with disabilities are and aging, and the aging population are living longer with disabilities, and that there's increasing medical needs. So just by knowing that, and knowing that there's a lot of things that we can talk about in terms of planning for the future, but brain health, I think, has to be emphasized over time, because not just for someone with a brain injury but also for the aging population, I think it's very important that we know how to take care of ourselves. And it's not a one-time deal. This is something that we're going to be doing over time, and this goes for everyone, regardless of what condition you're in. So they said that brain health is actually the condition where an individual can realize their own abilities and optimize their cognitive, emotional, psychological, and behavioral functioning to cope with life situations. So one of the things that we want to emphasize is about having the right diet, a well balanced diet. And I think people have heard this over time, that doctors or some of the nutritionists would recommend a Mediterranean diet. I know that it's maybe harder to even follow that, but I think that if we do remember that diet that's low on sodium can help us manage our blood pressure, be able to limit our caffeine. I know that caffeine is a kind of I've seen it with some of our my clients that they use it almost to kind of perk themselves up to get energy to go through the day. And I had one client who was drinking 14 cups of coffee a day to be able to do that, but then it doesn't allow them to go to sleep and have a good night's sleep, and then they wake up again and go to that cycle. um, and then also limit the sugary drinks, and absolutely don't do the energy drinks. It has a lot of chemicals, and it just spikes up your energy and makes you crash. And and also avoiding processed food, because you don't know what ingredients they have actually used in it that can make someone gain weight or whatnot. Now we talk about the brain, but there's actually we have three brains, and this is something that's been, heavily promoted. That, we have the brain, which is the seat of the logic and intellect, and about, 90% of our behaviors is controlled by the brain. But you also have the heart, and what they have indicated is that there's more neural pathways running from the heart to the brain than the brain to the heart. So, and then we also want to talk about the gut, where 90% of your body's serotonin is involved in mood management, and it's produced in the gut. And that means it's what you eat. It helps you with in managing your mood. So, a healthy gut is, they said that 90% of your serotonin is produced in the gut. And that means, like looking into taking probiotic and prebiotic, looking at eating more vegetables, more a balanced diet, and making sure you chew your food really well, to make sure that it can, that your body or your stomach can digest the food, and absorb the nutrients. So there's several feel good hormones, but definitely I think we've been hearing a lot about dopamine and serotonin. But I know that the last three slides I've been mentioning the serotonin. It's actually considered the hormone of happiness, or the happiness hormones. So dopamine is more the pleasure hormone. So dopamine is very addictive. It's something that you could hear, like when you go to the casino, or you win in a video game. That's a dopamine hit, right? But it's very fleeting. It doesn't stay that long. So that's why when people say, "Oh, I don't feel good today, but let me go shopping," that's a dopamine hit. Oh, let me go eat, that's a dopamine hit because it's instantly, right? And then for the serotonin, it's actually a feel good hormone that spreads across, gives signals across to 14 receptors in your brain versus five receptors, like the dopamine. So serotonin is not addictive. It's much more long term, and it's inspired by being able to have lasting joy, meaning, and you can access this through spending time with your friends and doing things, or like being productive in your day and feeling good about it. So some of the activities that can boost the serotonin, one they said is that eating tryptophan induced, like, or tryptophan inducing food like lean meat, eggs, and dairy food. Massage is something that actually helps out in managing stress. They've found that there's a 30% reduction in cortisol. Sunshine, being out there, even just soaking up the sun. I mean, of course you have to wear SPF to make sure that you are safe, but it kickstarts the brain serotonin. So if there's anything that you, when you wake up, even if you do just go out there and maybe sit down for 30 minutes in the sun, that helps out kickstart your serotonin. Eat dark leafy greens, and fish, and find out ways how to be more positive, because it's very subjective. Positivity and well-being is very subjective. So it's something that you will have to come up with, and find out what makes you feel and think positive. Decreasing your sugar intake. Meditation is that it actually raises what it's called, it's the 5-HIAA acid. It's what the brain needs to make serotonin. Exercise, it increases your heart rate and can elevate your serotonin levels. And then also taking vitamin C's. Studies have been out there that vitamin C has a natural antidepressant properties. And practice self-care to reduce stress. So behavior is a huge deal, especially when it comes to exercise. But it's something that it's imperative as we grow older, and also, like people with brain injury. I mean, it's much more imperative to do, and participate in an exercise. There's a strength training that's very important, to maintain your muscle mass, and it helps preserve your cognitive function. So that means it delays your dependency, or it delays the time that you will need help from others, because you can still do a lot more activities and engage in a lot more activities. So just to go back and finding out what your happiness, like the happiness hormones are. If we wanted to focus on the dopamine, it's about, the reward chemical. It's fleeting, but it's about celebrating little wins. So for serotonin, it's the mood stabilizer, and it's something that everyone really needs. And it's getting it from meditation, running if you can, or walking in nature, swimming, cycling, sun exposure. So exercises and eating right is going to be a really important thing. Um, so quality of life is such a huge deal as we age, and as and also for people with a traumatic brain injury, because prolongation of life without regard for the quality of life is not a universally desired goal. Because what makes life worth living, is something that's very important. It keeps us motivated, over time, and it keeps us motivated to keep going. And the factors that influences health in aging after a brain injury is about adapting a healthy behavior, a healthy lifestyle. So it's not only your diet, it's not just about engaging in regular physical activity, but also refraining from smoking, drinking, use of drugs. And this can help you gain some, like improve your overall quality of life. And these are some of the activities I kind of put together to help you, in being able to manage your time. And it helps you, if you can adapt this over time, it helps you in being able to, it helps you for neuroplasticity. It helps with learning. So it could be about learning a course, learning a different language. I don't know, maybe just saying hi in different languages might really be a great thing, right? Having, reorganizing your space, journaling would be very important. Make sure that you track your time. It's so easy to lose track of your time when we're always at home. And I know after the pandemic, and we've always been home, it's so easy to kind of get lost in time, and you wake up at 8, and then all of a sudden it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we've just been watching TV. So, but start a creative project, like kind of put together what are the things that you want to do, what are the things you want to learn, what are the things that you want to engage in, and then do something new. Listen to music, Look at old pictures that helps you reminisce and increase joy. Listen to the right music that you love. I know that if I want to have fun with my dad, we would play Elvis, so that helps. So, yeah, our environment also has a very important influence in the way we maintain healthy behaviors. But even though, like everyone is going through the aging process, we're still not all the same because we do have different neighborhoods, we have different support or community, and we also have different socioeconomic status. And then also it depends on how we perceive what we're capable of, like having a different mindset from each and every one is definitely a factor in how we could stick to a healthy behavior. But scientists are learning that our feelings are not hardwired, that emotions are created by our brains in response to what we're experiencing now, and what we have felt in the past. So it's very important to know that the small doses of daily delights that we had mentioned earlier, not every one of you is gonna agree with me with some of the activities, but it's a definitely a suggestion. I don't expect everyone to say, hey, I want to learn a new, how to play a new instrument today, but definitely just finding out ways that gives you joy and allows you to play is very, very important. So, supportive environment is definitely a huge deal when it comes to aging and in brain injury, because it is important for them to be able to still participate in as much activity as they can, and have the safe environment so that they can access, either walkways or pathways or parks, to be able to do an exercise and connect with people. Community engagement and increasing your productivity is one of the things that is going to be a constant goal for all of us, because this brings about that community that can support you over time, even during the times that you really, you don't need much help, or but there will be times that you will definitely need a lot of help. So community engagement, um, because it's something that brain injuries clients usually have challenges with. At least 70% of them have seen a decrease in social life. And then training of our families, caregivers, friends, whoever is interested, always engaging them and always training them is key. Because how many times have we heard when someone says, oh, you nothing looks, you seem okay, nothing's wrong, you could do this now, right? But I think engaging the people closest to you allows them to understand you better, and allows them to know your boundaries and what's effective for you. um, and then find an activity or a volunteer opportunity, whether it's for an hour or 2 hours, that might really help you out in being able to socialize more, and engage with other people and get more serotonin, right? So how do we plan for the future? We have all the brain techniques, the brain health, and all of the things that would help us in keeping ourselves, as much as possible young or healthy. So I think these are the points as a life care planner we really look at. um, these are the things that we want to consider, as we move forward, that we always kind of monitor. One is health. You look at how you're sleeping, the disruption in your sleep, nutrition, what changes in your medication, because that can change everything, that your routine, having the right structure for you, your daily structure is going to be really important. Housing and environment, making sure that you access, as much as possible, you clean out your space, organize your space so you don't fall, making sure that things are accessible for you. Your finances, arrange it as much as you can, making sure that everything is in line. Are there any apps that could help you out over time? Because the more that you can structure all these, the better it is for you to tweak it in the future, right? So you're not always guessing, oh, who's gonna take me to, to take me to the hospital now, right? Or who's gonna, if I have an emergency, find out the right support system, whose support system is gonna be there. As much as it doesn't have to be your friends or family, but if like we tend to go to like churches or the senior citizen centers, we can find supports there. Having the resources, transportation, emergency, what happens if there's an emergency, what are the technology required for you to function safely at home and in the community, and having your providers, having a list of your providers that you know who to go to, and whoever your support system also needs to know who those providers are. So in planning ahead, you have to be able to look at, like who can you go to for psychosocial services, community resources, and be able to access those throughout your lifespan. Because if like with brain injury being a chronic condition, we definitely need, to know who we're going to access, as like having a backup for your backup, right? That's going to be really important. And be able to restore functional capacity and follow through on exercises, nutrition, and follow through on certain activities that helps you keeps you or prevents a cognitive decline, and also helps you prevent acquiring any illnesses or chronic conditions. So, just like what I mentioned earlier, make sure that you follow your healthcare and wellness regimes, follow your prescriptions, but make sure you always ask your doctor or your provider if it's a medication to know what the side effects are, especially if you're taking multiple medications. Understand the interaction of all the medication. Make sure that you report to physicians if there are any concerns, and make sure you always organize and discuss your healthcare status. And sometimes I usually tell my clients that yearly you have to do this, just like you do your taxes. You have to go back and look at, what the whole year looks like, and kind of figure out, okay, what do I actually need for the next year. So, and I know your loved ones or your friends can definitely help you out. So follow a regular routine, with your doctors. Make sure you always educate yourself in self-management, and if you require an intensive intervention during your lifespan, please access the right people to do so. And I wanted to leave you with this, is that anyone who keeps the ability to see beauty never grows old. If by Franz Kafka. So, do you guys have any question? I hope that was very clear.
No, no, no questions. Just really glad to hear that she reemphasized everything that I already thought was super important, like exercise and health. I preach it regularly.
Talk to my family. That would be so awesome. I mean, I loved everything you said. Thank you.
Yeah, really, really good.